remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
Hi there, welcome to this video. In this video, I want to talk about the debate that we have in the UK about free speech. Now, this is a debate that is usually framed by the right as an attempt to defend our right to free speech against an overly mighty state. And one of the claims that is made, it was made recently by Liz Truss, is that people are being thrown in jail for what they post on Twitter.
I'm conscious of time. I want to talk to you about free speech because I think free speech is very much under attack in the country at the moment. I won't get into the specific cases, but we know people have been put in prison for things they said or tweeted. At the same time, we have prisons full and we have violent criminals who aren't being put in prison or are getting lenient sentences. We have a problem with free speech in the country. How has that been weaponized against us as an electorate?
There is a huge problem with free speech, and people are being put in jail for X posts.
And so I did a little bit of Googling, and the most high-profile case that I could find is that of Lucy Connolly. So what did she do? Well, during the riots that took place in Southport last year, she tweeted a tweet that said the following. She called for mass deportations of immigrants, and she called for hotels housing asylum seekers to be set on fire. And then she concluded by saying, if that makes me racist, so be it. Now, many people have defended the right to offend. Voltaire is said to have said, I may not like what you say, but I shall defend to the death your right to say it. He didn't actually say that. It's misattributed to him. But the point remains, many people defend the right to offend. But your right to offend, your right to liberty, stops at the moment where you are inciting other people to commit harmful action. And of course, the more far removed you are from that, the less extreme the case. And so this is an interesting case, but it is not the most egregious assault on free speech that we've seen in the UK. So I want to argue that actually we should be worried about free speech in the UK, but not for the reasons put forward by the right. So I want to remind people about a few cases that happened around the time of Charles II's accession to the throne. Here's just one example. So this is a man, a barrister, who was accosted by the police for holding up a blank sheet of paper.
Just a blank piece of paper?
Yeah, this one's smaller actually.
His protest was a blank page.
Yeah, it had nothing written on it. No.
But yesterday, Paul Powsland was threatened with arrest.
I was holding up a blank sign. Why are you asking for my details?
You said you were going to write stuff on it that may offend people.
I said I was going to write "not my king."
The altercation filmed on his phone has since gone viral.
No, someone may
Not my king. Someone might be offended.
So what happened when you came here with your blank piece of paper?
I said, would you arrest me if I write "not my king" on here? And he said he probably would, because it would be offensive, and therefore it would be against the Public Order Act.
Now, look, context matters, and we as a society, we've got to decide when free speech needs to be defended the most. Is it when somebody is cheering on a far-right riot aimed at some of the most vulnerable people within our communities, or is it when somebody is peacefully holding up a blank sheet of paper? Now, I must say, the man in that video was not arrested, but later on the day of the coronation, the pressure group Republic had organised protests. I myself went to London that day and was threatened with the Terrorism Act for walking down a street as it happens. But on the morning of those protests, what did the police do? Well, they made some arrests. Here's some news footage from that moment.
The head of anti-monarchy group Republic has been arrested along with 5 others ahead of the coronation ceremony. Met Police say the individuals have been held on suspicion of breaching the peace. Photos appear to show police confiscating Not My King placards.
There was another procession along the Mall this morning. The protesters marched away to the beat of the drum before the king had even left for the Abbey. We were arrested for having t-shirts and flags, she says.
This video isn't about your views on the monarchy. I'm not going to convince people to agree with me on that, I suspect. This video is about free speech and the extent to which we have free speech in the UK. Now, this issue has been raised, as I said, by people like D Vance in the United States. But the problem with the statements from the right is that they get the problem wrong. And they're not talking about free speech as an issue of public protest against those in power. They're talking about it on the scale of the individual, or indeed on the scale of corporations, massive corporations like Facebook and Twitter, and the threat to their speech. But the real threat to speech in the UK is the passage of Acts of Parliament already passed in the last Parliament by the Conservative government, namely the Policing Act and the Public Order Act. And taken together, these pieces of legislation forbid noisy and disruptive protest. Well, what kind of protest can you go on that isn't noisy? They forbid taking to a protest any items which could be used for what the Act of Parliament calls locking on. Well, again, that could have a very broad definition, and indeed it was used against the coronation protesters. The argument was that the straps holding down the signs in the van could have been used to lock on. Who doesn't, as they walk around the street, have a belt on them, or shoelaces, or any other number of devices that could be used to tie themselves to railings or whatever? Anyway, my point is this. There is a serious threat to free speech in the UK. It's not talked about. We have draconian legislation that can be used against those who are protesting to hold power to account. It exists, it's on the statute books, and it needs to be repealed. But actually, we have a Labour government, and you heard it with Keir Starmer's response to D Vance, that feels like actually English liberties are not under threat. And I'll finish by that complacent message from Keir Starmer. From me, goodbye and best wishes.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.